All right. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to introduce Jessica Lamers. She was in dentistry for 12 years, 10 years in the DSO sector and 2 years in the tech. And she is a Peloton guru. Congratulations.
I don't know about that, but.
Yeah. I'd like to introduce Ron Burke. Ron Burke's been in the dental space for 30 years, specifically on the dental tech side. He is a golfer aficionado, but does not bring the talent. So
the passion with no talent.
The passion with no talent. I mean, that's where it's at. And then Sherry is with Vine. She has been in dental for 26 years. She ran multiple DSOs and single locations, and has been with Vine for 9 years. And she is an avid boater here in Nashville. So welcome. Thank you very much. I want to talk about the purpose of the panel and the reasoning why we're here and having this conversation. The panel's aim to explore the significance of the integration and strategic approaches. We'll discuss key factors and essential questions to consider when integrating technology into your organizations. So I want to start with you, Jessica. During your time, those 10 years working in the DSO sector, what obstacles did you guys, confront while working in that, and in particularly in relation to dental technology integration?
Well, for one, what did we not face? Because there's so many. Like, what do you choose? And who's credible, and how long will they be there if you're going to integrate it into multiple locations? That's a big hassle itself. But once you choose and make that decision, I think the biggest thing that we faced was integrating it at every level. So one of the biggest things that we faced during COVID was determining, okay, our overhead. We were talking about it earlier. How can we cut that back? We could only see emergency visits. We have to start figuring out where can we cut in some money. So dental intelligence actually was on the chopping block for us. Because we were using it at the executive level, but we were not using it at the office level. So we really knew that the value of having those KPIs at the executive level were determining where we were focusing our time throughout our practices. And we changed during that time frame. We did a quarter project where we had to actually go into the offices and integrate dental intelligence at the office level. That helped bring in revenue to support the need for dental intelligence. Well, during that process, I worked heavily with a product team at Dental Intelligence, telling them every week, okay, these are the things that we ran into that are a development issue. And we would talk back and forth and, hey, where are you at with these ones? Okay, actually we need to reprioritize because this is higher priority for us. So the communication for us was the biggest factor to help with that integration and make it more successful. Of course, over time, you have more and more needs, but I think what we need to know as a customer base from the DSO side to the technology communication is we don't know what's going on unless you're communicating with us. If you want to keep going to different products, you're going to keep having issues and they're never going to integrate the way that you want them to get integrated. Now, I'm not saying that one product can solve everything. So then communicate what you would like to see, and we would put that priority list up higher to make that integration work with that other vendor.
Okay, great. And so, show of hands, how many are communicating with your integration partners right now in your DSOs? Give me a yay. Yay! All right, how many, show of hands, are not right now? Give me a boo. All right, good. That's great. That's awesome. Sherry, question for you. How could there be any dependencies or possibility of compatibility issues with existing systems or processes or technology infrastructure regarding integration?
Absolutely, because as most practices with the DSO space, we're acquiring a lot of older practices. So you have the legacy platforms and that are going to have compatibility issues. When you're looking at the technology space in any of the companies out there, is the infrastructure set up, and are you updating those legacy platforms to make it compatible with the newer technology? And My brain is going wild here. So it's not only just the compatibility issues, but your hardware, software, servers. Are they up to date? Are they going to work with the newer technology? You would think that something, Windows 7, it's not going to work with a lot of newer technology. So there's a lot of companies that don't want to invest in updating those computer systems when they go in and acquire a company, and which is going to cause issues with several of our companies in working with those groups. And so I would definitely recommend looking at all options, look at your hardware, software, legacy systems, and make sure that you are talking to your vendors to see what their compatibility will be with each service, and that way you can ensure that you are integrating it seamlessly without any issues.
Awesome. Ron?
Daniel, can I add something Jessica said?
Sure.
I just want to add on to that. So, because I'm in product, I'm a product manager, so that's like I would be on the other end of that conversation. One key thing that drives product people crazy is when you say, if you just add a checkbox here, just do this. So I would just say, think in terms of what is my problem? Like identify and try to articulate what the problem is and what your acceptance criteria is for this is what we need. And then let the product people think about, understand your business, because product people can hopefully come up with things that you wouldn't know because you don't have experience, but because we talk to all sorts of people and we hear all ideas from all sorts of different areas. That is the job of a product manager, is to take that, identify the problem, and then understand how can we articulate that into a solution that solves the problem. And it's not always just, well, just add this to a drop down. Just put a checkbox. If you just put a checkbox here, so it's a pet peeve of product managers. Anyone that you talk to, you'll hear that.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Yeah, Sherry.
I would add to that, make sure if you are using dental IT companies that you're on the same page with your IT company. Because if your IT company is the one working with the vendors and you're not on the same page there, they're not going to deliver the information that you're looking for. So I always recommend having yourself and your IT company on the phone with whatever technology company you're looking at to make sure that everybody's aligned, especially with product. We can deliver if we can understand the full needs and the aspects of your business.
Thank you. Thank you. Jessica, any comments on specifically around, you talked about, engaging the locations, going down to and working with, those offices. What positive outcomes came out of that when you began to implement, at that level?
Well, obviously we saw a return on investment, and the stance of what dental intelligence brings is we focus heavily more on the analytics piece that brought in the KPIs. So they have daily actions that they could take, which were from the morning huddle or the call-in site where they're pulling in potential revenue opportunities. And so we saw that return on our executive levels of seeing, okay, our numbers are increasing too. Sure. Not only are we seeing that we filled the need for the overhead issue, but now we're actually expanding that. And I think we did a case study on it, and it's been a couple of years, so don't get me wrong. But I think we increased our revenue by 4 times by just integrating it within that quarter.
Wow. Same store, same growth. I mean, that's awesome. That's great.
It was a really good changer for us.
I worked in antiquated offices where we were paper and going into the technology offices where everything was electronic and seeing the differences that things make and the difference in ROI for your business, and really vetting the companies and making sure that they work with what you're looking for. And Dental Intel is great for analytics, and Vine, of course, we do a lot of solutions for your revenue cycle and making sure that your doctors are getting paid for the work that they're doing.
I think the biggest thing that you get from utilizing technology and then communicating properly to these technology companies is time back into your practice for the patients that are in front of you. Because if you're utilizing it correctly and you're integrating it within the practices, then you're getting that time back with the patients that are right in front of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's key. That's central. So far, I'm hearing a nice foundational communication, right? I mean, communicating with the vendors that you're working with, communicating, with the team, and then getting their voice in understanding that. I mean, that's critical. So when we're looking at integration, how it in looking at those solutions like analytics, clearinghouses, or even AI. What are the key factors, Ron, to weigh when deciding between, integrating, within a PMS or outside of a PMS? What are some strategic ideas to really maximize the goal and the output and what they want to achieve for same-store growth?
Yeah, it's an interesting position being the PMS because we are getting it from all sides. We have you as customers coming to us saying, we need this, and we have vendors coming to us saying, we need you because our customer X has your product.
That's why we put you in the middle.
That's right. So it's an interesting space to be in. But yeah, so understanding some of the opening comments, really, I jotted down because the integration has to be in the workflow of the user, because all these products do things. But if they're off to the side, if it's an extra step, if it's inconvenient, that is the main thing that drives the lack of use of those things. And it's the number one thing we look at that's driving what we do. Is the other thing that in opening remarks talked about labor shortage. Everyone wants to do more with less.
Yep.
Sure.
And that's, so being in the middle of that, we need to find out ways, how can we accomplish more things with fewer? How can we engage the patient better so that it doesn't require a staff member being on the phone to handle that phone call? So all of those things are just critical too. And so defining, here's where we're at, and then defining some strategies for here's how we're going to measure success, and that allows you to then drive towards an end result that makes it useful.
Sure.
Right. That's
Sherry?
one of the things that we're doing here at Vine as well. Of course, you have your integrated solutions, and then we're one of those companies that have a lot of, I'm not going to say non-integrated, but we're not technically built into a lot of the practice management systems, but we work and play very well with the practice management systems. And so the goal at Vine was to really build an all-in-one inclusive solution, like Ron's talking about, to lower the manual work and identify come up with a solution to replace that fact of lower staff and not having enough staff. We talked to offices across the country, whether it's single location, DSO, they're all having the staffing challenges. And so that's why all three companies up here, we're bringing the technology to your practice to get rid of those issues with staffing challenges.
And I think you can identify, there are some integrations, like I was thinking about, what are some things that don't need to be in the way? If you integrated with an accounting system, I've had several, I want you to integrate with accounting package X. Well, that's not going to affect your front desk. So that can be off to the side. And there are things that you could identify what can be off to the side that doesn't have to be a direct inside the practice management. But there are some things, claims, patient engagement, artificial intelligence, incorporation, all of those things, if you really want the success of the adoption, that you almost have to, I joked with someone about, I want to put the feature in front of the user, like they literally have to stumble over it to not use it. Sure. So that's one of the goals, is to make sure we have functionality that puts it into the natural workflow. And that's how the DSOs and anyone using it gets the result they're looking for.
Right. And to add to that, whenever you have that technology built in, whether it's built in or outside of the practice management system, one of the things that you need to do is look at the end outcome. How much time or effort is your staff spending on the end process versus the start? So you may have fewer clicks up front. How much work are they doing on the back end? A lot of people don't think of that because they think everything's built in, or it's right here at a fingertip, I can press a button. But then what kind of issues could it be causing on the back end that would be taking up overhead and reducing your ROI?
I mean, if you think about it, most PMSs, some of them, you can only open that one screen and you can't go into another one on that same computer just to access something different when you're in the middle of a claim submission, but then you also need to go into checking out a patient or doing a treatment plan.
Yep.
And so, again, what's needed in and what's needed out. So
Right.
you've got to think about those things when you're asking these questions to these product developers. Another thing I was thinking for Ron is that, you know, we talk about PMS integration, and you guys have the voice. If you have more practices, you have more of a voice to say, hey, can you put this PMS on the top priority list? I mean, you're not only working with general dentistry PMSs, you're working with sometimes your specialty practices. And we don't put that on a high priority list until more people speak up and say that. Or there's, you know, a report that comes out on LinkedIn that tells you, hey, here are the top, you know, 3 or 4 PMSs that you should be focusing on. That's where our minds go in tech. Let's focus on that because that's the mass majority of our customer clientele.
Yep.
Right.
We are market driven, right? So that's where, yes, I totally agree with that. So the more people that come to us that say, we need this, that goes into the bucket of, okay, we keep hearing this, so we can't ignore that. We want to be responsive to the marketplace. I totally agree with that. I keep thinking of other things. So one other thing I wanted to bring in was when you talk about integrations, particularly this is from a PMS viewpoint, you've got the PMS and you've got the vendor. And just from experience, I had a situation where I expected my product to be the source of truth. And in working with that vendor, we kept having problems. And what I learned is that that vendor was getting information from my product, but they considered what they had as the source of truth. And that was creating conflict because the two sides weren't always matching. So that'd be one thing that I would give you a pointer to learn about is as you work with a vendor, make sure you understand where is the source of truth so that you can negotiate if it's wrong. If something goes wrong, where is it so that you can better identify how to resolve that conflict. Source of truth.
Sherry?
Always.
There's one thing that we started here at Vine, and it's called Voice of the Customer. And we do a health scorecard, the analytics part, but we're doing it based on our customers and the health of their accounts. And so the voice of the customer, we want to hear from not only you in this room, but all of your end users in your practices. We want to understand the needs and wants and how we can effectively make their lives easier, as well as giving you the ROI for utilizing those solutions. So when looking at technology companies, make sure that they are open to listen to the voice of the customer and not just being a giant and building something and saying, this is what we're gonna give you, here you go, use it or don't. So the voice of the customer is always important. And to Jessica, you have the biggest voice as a DSO with any practice management system or any vendor.
Right. Great conversation. Absolutely. One question that I have that came to my mind is during the research and kind of the vetting, looking at, which, products, that will elevate the growth of, the business. Who should be included in those decision I wouldn't need to say decision process because ultimately all of us here are decision makers. But is it advisable to have people and a team that are at the location level to be brought in, given advice and things, and in relation to change management, getting the team engaged in a part of it. And Jessica, when you were working with DI back in that 10 years in the DSO sector, how did that play out?
So I would say, first off, it depends on your size, right? Because if you're the heartland of DSOs, you have a team that's vetted out that can look into products and kind of know the field ops plus the home executive level that you need at the HQ office. Yeah. But if you're smaller and you're an emerging DSO, you don't have that infrastructure to allow for that. So I would say, like, when you're going into this, I mean, we're all probably pretty smart at this level. When we integrate technology or supplies or anything, we're going to pilot it out. Like, make sure you pilot out into a small group, and that small group being, communicative to not only you internally of what you think that needs to happen or it needs to get better, but then you're also having, standpoints where you're talking to the vendor. And so if that vendor's not willing to meet with you as often as you would like, then you should probably question that relationship if they're not wanting to do that on the front end when you're in the pilot process, because you're about to integrate that to, 20, 50 locations, if not more. And what's that going to look like down the road when they change or make an update? And then you're having these bugs and issues that your offices can't communicate back to the vendor.
Right. I would add to that and say creating the buy-in from your dental practices itself is huge, because you're spending money on this technology. You want everybody to utilize that technology to the best of the ability for your practices. And what we see talking to offices all across the country is they may have a vendor, they may have the technology there, and they may have several different features, but your offices are only using one feature. They're not using the full capability of the solutions and the technology that you are investing in. So you have to create that buy-in from your front office, whether it's clinical staff, who look at the features and how it affects the overall flow of your practice, and make sure that everybody is buying in and that they're getting training and the questions answered, and do check-ins to make sure that they are not just throwing your money out the window for technology that they're not utilizing.
To add to that is, okay, buy-in, but then you also need to think about learning, like the learning management. I mean, we talked about it earlier. You're having staffing issues, retention is kind of up and down still. People are still leaving or quiet quitting, whatever that we want to call it. But at the end of the day, that means retraining. And so if you have more technology, that means more times that you're going to have to be at the office level, or your field ops is being pulled from a high level operations to, hey, I'm getting into the weeds of training somebody on a product that I've done 3 times this year at the same office because we're having retention issues. What is a vendor bringing to the table to help with that learning management system of helping you not be on the field as much, and so you can still stay high level?
I'm just going to agree with everything you said, because certainly being on the end as a PMS, I've been in both seats. I've been the vendor replacing another vendor, and then I've been the person being replaced, and hearing the feedback from users saying, well, I'm going with this because your product doesn't do X, Y, or Z, and I'm thinking, oh, dang, it does. So what that really is an education component of making sure people know about what your product can do, and then it's driving adoption. And that's probably one of the things that all of our PMSs have so many features. It's something we worry about, is how can we make sure that everyone knows about all the things that it can do, because invariably it ends up being the one thing that you do that they don't know about that becomes the reason why they're shopping for something else. So we spend a lot of time trying to identify how can we do better at educating, because particularly at DSOs, you have team members coming to work, they weren't really involved in the selection of this thing that they have to sit in front of 8 hours a day. They are showing up to work and they're being told, you have to use this product. So we really have to worry about making sure they are educated, giving opportunities like this, user meetings, webinars, to get the word out about what this product can do, because that's how, again, to the opening remarks, if the staff isn't using it, we always joke about a feature that isn't used isn't useful. So that's the focus is making sure that the things that we build get used, because that's how you get any benefit and any ROI out of that feature.
Great. So I want to touch on the, what we see on sites in every full integration, right? How many have seen that? Yes, we integrate. Yep, we'll integrate. No problem. Integrate. But what does that really mean? Right? And Ron, I want to go to you to start with, and really just see, like, Okay, when a solution promotes it, yeah, we integrate, precisely what does that really mean? And am I really transferring all of the PII to that vendor to accomplish my task? Or not?
As a software person, I've kind of, whenever I hear someone say could or should, like those are immediate red flags. Could or should means it doesn't.
No.
So when we talk about integration, we want to make sure that yes, there is, when I put in A, I need to get B. And if I don't get B, then that's not successful. If I have to go to C and D to get to B, then you're not really fully integrated. So we worry about making sure that when we have a feature that is considered integrated, it's seamless into the workflow of the user, because that's the only way. We keep coming back to that theme, but that's how you get the adoption. So integration, there can be all sorts of popular term these days is RPAs. So if you have a robotic process and that's the integration, that's not really an integration. It is a way to achieve the end result, but that's not the same as an integration. It's not working directly with the vendor. Sometimes that has to happen though, because that vendor doesn't want to work with you. So we understand what goes into that. But an RPA is not an integration. So I'd be a little bit wary of that. RPAs are prone to breaking, because if the vendor changes something about their application, it's going to, the RPA is relying on a certain field being in a certain position, and that's what can cause problems. So that's one thing I'd always look for in integrations is it true? Let me talk to your vendor and have them tell me that you're integrated versus an RPA type integration.
And I think when you bring to the point of like integrations, like the RPA stance, like if they're integrated and they're talking to each other, they're already saying, hey, we're about to do this update. We're going to make sure that they sync properly on the back end before the user builds that bug. I mean, there's always going to be some bugs, but it's not going to be as heavy.
Right. True integrations would tend to be talking in terms of APIs. So if your vendor is saying, yes, we use the API of product X, that's a better indication of a stronger integration. Vendors with APIs will publish API changes, and that means there is a programmatic way that there's an agreed contract about if I do this, I'll get this result. So that's a good buzzword to make sure to throw into the conversation is, are you integrated via API, or is it some other type of, there's command line interfaces, something I know in an old product I did. Command line is just one way. It's my product sending some data points to another product, and that other product can then function. It's usable, it's functional, but it's not two-way communication. So that'd be another, is the integration two-way? Is your product talking back to my product? That would be another thing to check for in integration.
One of the things that I'm seeing in the industry and talking to a lot of DSOs, I was on a call with one last night, that medical companies are starting to come into our space. And so I'm not going to name names of companies, but when you see that, I would highly recommend you vet, because if they say they can do something, they could be using an in with one of our companies or another company, and they're not giving you that true integration or that true API connection. But they're going to come out with these shiny bells and whistles to make you think that they're here for dental. There's still a long way to go to get the medical space into dental. And so I would highly recommend, if you see that and you're interested in it, make sure you do your investigation. Ask for referrals or people that are utilizing that solution now, to make sure that you are getting proper feedback from the offices, not just taking a vendor's word for it.
Well, and then to that point, okay, they could be integrating and giving that feedback. However, are you asking that referral person that you're talking to if it is doing the two-way communication? Because that's adding another step back onto your team member's plate, where you're trying to exclude that so that way they'd had more time to do other things. So if it's not writing back into the PMS, not two-way, then
Yep.
you're having to do another step just to have your clinical documents correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. So what strategies should we ensure the success of the integration that we plan to implement? Like we go through the vetting process, we have that vendor, we're excited, the team's on board, it's been clearly communicated, here's our North Star that we're going to drive to, and it's go time. What strategies would you suggest or put out to say, hey, these are the right approaches to team adoption, team engagement, and ultimately success?
I mean, essentially, I think what you need to do is create that plan. What does that look like? We got everybody's buy-in. You did maybe a small pilot, but okay, what's that look like to put that into mass scale? Are you going to do that regionally? Are you going to do that all at once? Depending on the product, I'm sure it's going to matter of how you do that. But once you determine that, can you do that with your current infrastructure? I mean, if you're an emerging DSO, you may not have that infrastructure to integrate that at that level. So can the vendor help out? Or can you implement an integrator that's outsourced that's going to help you bring in that one-on-one attention that you're going to need from the beginning and that 30, 60, 90 days to get it, 1, installed, 2, integrated, and 3, actually utilized.
Sure.
A strong integration also means that you need to set aside some time to because both sides, your organization is going to change and the software product that you're integrating with is going to change. And you want to make sure that you set aside time to get the updates, get the upgrades, get the improvements. I had a discussion one time about how come my product doesn't do this with your product? And the answer is, well, it started out with, let's just get these two things connected, and we were always going to come back to adding this other piece. Well, guess what happens? Time, focus, energy. So coming back to that other piece sometimes can fall by the wayside. And in the end, it's what hurts the value of that integration because you didn't, you just got it up and running, great. We're over the first hurdle, but now we need to add those other pieces to improve the value of it.
Right, and I'm going to kind of agree with what Jessica was saying about looking at the vendors and what we can do for you. So making sure, I mean, you are VIPs in our world. You are the important people because of the scale that you have and the amount of business that you're bringing to us. So making sure that the vendors are creating a structured training process, onboarding process, as well as looking at the health of your business constantly and doing those QBRs to provide the feedback and the SLAs and everything to you. You want to look at your productivity reporting and make sure that the vendors are providing you, like with Vine, we provide a free training service. So even if your staff turnover is nonstop in a practice, which some of them are, then we provide training no matter how many times you have new staff. And so I would definitely vet all vendors and make sure that they are able to provide that training, especially if you're a smaller emerging DSO and don't have the infrastructure to add in those training people.
And then maybe from there, also asking your vendor, what other companies do they work with that are like size? Have they seen progress at certain stances of, should I be matching that same model? Is it, am I successful or am I not successful in this onboarding process based on previous experience?
And look and see ask what kind of support are you going to provide. If your offices have to call directly into a regular support line and get in line with every mom and pop shop out there, that's not putting you first. So make sure your vendors are looking at you and creating the VIP white glove experience for your practices as well as your companies.
Yeah, one of my number one things is when I'm talking with a practice and why do you do this? And if the answer is because that's the way we've always done it, that's like the number one thing is like, okay, we need to stop. We need to figure out, is there a better way to do this?
Sure.
And look for, is there technology that can replace One of my favorite stories, have been at this so long. I was sitting at a front desk, just helping people as they were learning a new product, and I saw a woman on, typical dental office, long front reception desk, and she, in her chair, slid all the way to the other end to open a filing cabinet to grab an EOB, and then slid back to the other. And so I stopped and said, "Why did you do that?" "Oh, well, the EOBs are in the filing cabinet over there." And I'm like, that is a great thing to stop doing. Let's let the practice management have the EOB, so you don't have to slide down to find it. So and again, that's product people. That's hopefully what they do, is they sit in offices and they see people do kind of crazy, silly things, and you say, "Wait, why did that happen? And how can we make that better?" And to me, that's one of my favorite things, because I thought of it, I recognized it. So it was just a good, useful example of observing behavior and saying, let's stop doing that because we've always done it, and use technology to solve that problem.
Yeah.
I love that comment, because I've worked in that paper office and all the way through, but I've worked with office managers and people in the practice. They don't like change. They get used to a solution, and that's what they want, no matter if it's right for your business. So one of the things that I've always looked at, hiring inside the dental practice as well as hiring in for Vine, is making sure that you have people that are bought into your vision and the growth of your company. Because if they don't like change and they're not supportive of change, then it's not going to be a benefit no matter what technology you put in your practices.
That's awesome. How many here have had success with an integration? Say yeah. Yeah, that's right. Awesome. Last question, okay? What can we expect in the future regarding technology integrations?
AI.
I'll start. One of the things that, again, DSOs, one of the opening comments was talked about labor pressure and the shortage of labor. So one of the areas that just being more consumer focused. Even today, I checked in for my flight using an app, and so there's a lot more people are expecting the ability to do things themselves, self-help. So that becomes another area of technology where that can help kind of answer that labor shortage. That's one less call to the office. That's one less missed appointment because I've been able to check in online or confirm my appointment online. So I think that's really an interesting focus of how we can use technology to solve some of those problems.
Sure.
Right, and I would add to that, one of the features that we offer here at Vine is online scheduling, and some of the things that we get from the office manager. I don't want technology running my schedule. It's not. You have full autonomy to really control what you're putting out there for the online scheduling for your clients to actually book. So the way I look at it, if I have 1,000 hygiene patients in one practice that did not schedule their hygiene appointment, how do I get that productivity back in my practice? Having a campaign set up, having technology that automates that, sends out the online scheduling link, so that way if it's 8 o'clock at night or on a Saturday or Sunday, your patients, they're looking and they're like, I see that text, I need to make my hygiene appointment. They click on it, they make their appointment. It's getting back on your schedule, getting the productivity back in your practices without any human intervention whatsoever. So,
I think that question's really hard to answer, right? Because the future determines how we're communicating with one another, the customers to the vendors, and then the vendors to the other vendors that are serving all of you. So it really is in your hands back to say what you want and what we need to deliver.
Yeah. Well said. And it really does come down to the vision that you have, for your business and what you want to drive. What's your North Star? And, the systems that you have in place, as we, wrap up this panel, understanding what's in your technology roadmap. Do you have one? And, and if you do, who's being a part of that, right? And, who are you working with? Who are you speaking with? What list of vendors are you currently vetting and communicating with You know, is everybody on board, or do you just have that single vision and you're like, let's go for it, everyone else, and then you turn around and no one's with you? You know, so it's having the team on board, team collaboration. And they're motivated. You know, you're sending energizers and excitement when things are about to ramp up and go green, and you know, and you've done your homework.
Yep.
So, last thoughts, panel?
It-
Oh yes, Jill.
Actually wanted to share kind of a tactical idea to accomplish what you're talking about. So I saw this from a DSO I worked with a number of years ago and thought it was kind of genius. It follows, Ron, what you were asking for as product manager, which is, please don't just tell me what I'm supposed to do or what you want it to look like, tell me what the problem is. But this might be something, because when we talk about giving vendors feedback and asking and letting them know what we need to be working on, you make an assumption that there is that we know what that is, or that we have collectively out of 120 offices decided here's what our priorities are. So one group that I worked with, I thought this was really helpful. They designed, as part of their support ticket system, they designed a template that said, if this is a feature request, because sometimes it's a problem, et cetera, but if it's a feature request, they had a template that said, what is the problem? What is the business impact? It forced you had to answer those questions. Before then you could add, and please just put the checkbox here, right? But it pushed them to answer those couple questions. Then what it did, it would allow everyone in the organization to add.
Wasn't the wrong answer.
But it allowed everyone in the organization, they could make the DSO leadership could make it feel to them, hey, you have a mechanism, we want everyone's voice, but then all of those answers, obviously they came to the support team or whatever, hey, we can fix this, it's a printer thing, it's a this thing, it's a training thing, because sometimes, of course, you know, we already have that feature, you just didn't get trained on it, or you should have, or, oh, you just started last week, no wonder you don't know that. But then they could take the true kind of product enhancement requests, then the leadership could say how many of these are coming in. It helped drive the decision-making and the priorities through the leadership that can then come back to you. Because it's one thing for you to sit down with a major DSO and they say, we want this thing. Well, do they really know, and what's that process?
Sure.
So I thought that might be helpful from a kind of a tactical perspective of how do you actually aggregate the right information so you know what you want to ask the vendor for.
Right.
Anyway.
It's almost like vetting yourself.
And like you said, you know, pulling that information and like getting at a high level of what are you trying to accomplish, because you have to remember, we're serving multiple DSOs and you guys all wanted a different KPI, but they're just labeled differently. So,
Absolutely.
and maybe one little tweak here and there. So we're trying to figure out how can we mass produce this one solution for multiple people that feels custom to your practices.
Build once, sell many. That's software. So
Yeah. Thank you.
Don't build 50.
Thank you, Jessica, Ron, Sherry, for your time. We appreciate it. It's great insights. Michelle?